On today's show, a pair of injuries for the Hawks to be dealing with in the coming days, plus a brief look at the game on Friday between the Hawks and the Hornets, and all of that is coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1830 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday evening here in late October. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. The game season right now with a big return at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You can start it with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. And the place to go is FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcast. That includes Apple and Spotify. And we're also on YouTube. Please like the video as you are watching it on that platform. Subscribe, tell your friends, leave comments, and I really appreciate all the support as always. If you missed it, I did a full breakdown of the game, the season opener for the Hawks on Wednesday evening. Prior to that, it was a 5-episode and 3-day barrage of preview content when it came to Jalen Johnson's extension and all kinds of stuff. So it's been very busy this week. And in fact, I was going to take today off from the podcast in between games because of the extra episodes. But then things broke in a direction where I thought I would kind of owe you a podcast and a reaction. So we're going to be doing that today. For the most part, it will be injury focused. And at the end of the podcast, I'll share some audio for you, I would say with you, from Quin Snyder. And then also I will kind of briefly preview the game on Friday between the Hawks and the Hornets. First, though, the Hawks were off today, no practice, but that only added to the surprise when it was revealed that Bogdan Bogdanovic, their third best player, in my opinion, will be sidelined with right hamstring tendinopathy. Now, right now, all we know officially on the timeline is that he's not going to be able to play on Friday. The Hawks play on Sunday and Monday in a back-to-back. Their first one of those that counts this season. It's also that includes travel in the back-to-back. But in the meantime, that's what we have to go on. All we know right now is literally what I just said. Right hamstring tendinopathy, and he's going to be out for the game on Friday. I asked people around the team, I would say, after the injury report came out, and it was kind of a surprise to everybody. No one had more details to share. Tendinopathy is sometimes, from what I can gather, used as kind of a catch-all term on NBA injury reports for tendon issues in various parts of the body. I'm not going to try to guess, honestly. It's definitely a concern. It could be multiple weeks. It could be a long time. It could be short. I don't know. And there are many different kind of I would say diverging pieces of information out there. When you try to Google and search this stuff, I'm not going to try to tell you that I know more about it than I do. But right now, that's what we know. Bogey only appeared once in the exhibition slate for the Hawks in the preseason, though the messaging there from the team has been consistently the entire time, just taking it easy with him. He had of course played a lot of basketball this summer, playing with the Serbian national team all the way to the medal round of the Olympics, et cetera, et cetera. And also, he did not have an injury listing of any kind for the opener on Wednesday. He was better in the second half of that game than the first half, but he also wasn't very good by his standards in that game. He didn't close the game. I don't think he looked great physically in either game, but I thought it was probably just rust, but it could have been the injury. We just don't know if this was already a thing before this or not. But no matter what, it's a big, big deal here that he might miss some time for the Hawks. I've said repeatedly that he's their third best player, at least right now. So I will touch on this when it comes to the rotation stuff in a minute, but obviously operating without Bogey on offense in particular is a huge deal for a team that already has some questions about when Trey sits, and also even when Trey plays, Bogey's by far their best and most threatening shooter. So that is a big loss, and we'll come back to that more in a second. The other injury update is Kobe Bufkin. So this is already coming up a little bit in previous days. Bufkin hurt his shoulder over the weekend, last weekend I should say, and they quickly ruled him out at that point in time for Wednesday's opener. So we already knew that. But then Thursday afternoon was the only time that this kind of got more direct. So the Hawks had not said anything about the actual injury. It was just the right shoulder injury until today. And again, there was no practice today for any follow-up on that. So now the Hawks have announced that they're going to be calling this a right shoulder subluxation for Bufkin. Notably, that's the same designation that they actually put on Bufkin's shoulder back in July when he hurt the shoulder before Summer League in a training camp for Summer League. He missed all of that time, etc. He was in Vegas but did not play at all. Since then, Lauren Williams, who's been a guest on this podcast, of course, of the AJC, reported, and citing a source here, that it's actually not a re-injury of the same injury, but it's still the same listing. So I don't know what that's going to be looking like in the future. There are no details yet on Bufkin's timeline for recovery and, of course, return. The official updated note from the Hawks was that Bufkin and the Hawks are determining his treatment options, end quote. I think it's pretty clear that's not going to be a day-to-day thing necessarily. I could be wrong about that, but it feels to me, based on what I've heard so far, that it won't be like he's back on Sunday or something like that. It might be a little bit. We'll see. When you heard it before Summer League, they ruled him out immediately for all of Summer League. Now, obviously, Summer League, there's no reason to push him because those cases don't matter. But for a recent Hawks reference, Vit Krejci had a shoulder subluxation last season in the non-dominant shoulder. For Vit was the left side, Kobe is the right side, their non-shooting shoulder. And Vit missed like 6 weeks, 5.5, 6 weeks. So that is one data point. I'm not going to tell you that's a definitive timeline for Kobe to return, but it probably won't be like tomorrow. In fact, it won't be tomorrow for sure on Friday. But he's already been ruled out for that game. We will see when he returns, and the Hawks will put out, I'm sure, at some point, a timeline for reevaluation or return. If you're new to this, the Hawks do not like to do return timelines. They often, in their official injury updates, will say player will be reevaluated in such and such time. And reevaluation does not mean return, but at least that's something to go on. Right now, we don't even have that for Kobe. So we're kind of flying blind on that one. And when they're still evaluating the treatment options, that means he hasn't had any treatment yet. And no timelines. It could be a little while for sure, a couple weeks or longer. We just don't know. And in the meantime, what we do know is that at least for Friday and probably a little bit beyond that, the Hawks have two guys, and I would say one especially, that was written and penned in the rotation, another one in Bufkin that was probably going to be playing, that are going to be out, and they're both like not the same position, but certainly in a similar position in the backcourt. So after the break, to hear from our sponsors, I'll talk about a little bit about how they're going to handle this potentially rotation-wise, etc. And then at the end of the show, a little bit of a preview of Hawks Hornets on Friday. But first, a word from our partners on the show. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. This podcast is about basketball, of course. If you've ever seen a hockey game live, you don't have to have me tell you that it's really, really fun and awesome. It brings a sensory experience to the table. And at Game Time, you get tickets for all kinds of sporting events, from basketball to hockey to football, baseball, etc., etc. And plus, you get tickets for music, comedy, and theater as well. They have a new feature at Game Time called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets even easier and better for you. They filter out all the stuff that you actually don't need, and only show you the incredible deals on great seats. There's no actual wasting time searching through thousands of tickets that you actually don't want. For example, there are awesome deals all the time, but right now there's one for the Hawks game on Monday against Washington, including a pair of tickets that are available right now for $16 each, including fees at Game Time. That's a great deal, of course. There's more of that happening all the time at Game Time, and I love the feature at Game Time actually lets you turn this on to view the seats through all-in pricing. So there are no surprise fees when you have that feature enabled at the checkout screen. No surprise. It's just this is what you pay, and there it is. Also, they have the lowest possible price at Game Time, and they will credit you 110% of the difference if they don't. And you can take all the guesswork out of buying tickets right now with the folks at the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account at Game Time and use that promo code. It is LOCKEDONNBA. One more time, that code is LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's Game Time. All right, so what now, basically, is a question people are asking about their rotation, how the Hawks are going to handle all of this, and it's a reasonable question, to be sure. So on the positive side, the Hawks have reasonable depth right now. That was an emphasis all summer long. They got bigger, they got deeper across the board, but no team, basically, is fully, I would say, prepared for cluster injuries. When I say that, there's a limit to how many injuries you can have at a similar position and still be kind of okay. Right now, they're okay, I would say. They can handle these two for a bit if they have to. In the short term, that looks like probably Garrison Matthews sliding into Bogey's role, at least a smaller version of Bogey's role. Offensively, you got Vit Krejci, who's been already playing backup point guard in the absence of Cody Bufkin on the game on Wednesday. But also Vit is wing size, can play more wing if he needs to. And then, of course, Zachary Shishé played 19 minutes in the opener. He might be able to play more than that. In fact, he can play more than that if they actually need him to. So they have reasonable depth here. I would say that Krejci and Matthews are both rotation caliber guys in the NBA. Garrison is, of course, not Bogey. He's much worse than Bogey. That's notable. But he is a rotation player. He's a really, really, really good shooter, and opposing defenses do guard him like he's a real shooter, and that really helps them. Off the ball, he'll draw a charge for you. He'll get three-shot fouls for you offensively. He is a fine player to again, plug in. It is still not Bogey, notably, but he is playable, to be sure. And then Vit, I really like Vit. The contract is awesome in itself. And again, he only played actually exactly when Trey sat on Wednesday, but Veet can play wing minutes for you. And I think he might be needing to do that at this point in time, plus Reese Shea, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that. There are 2 rotation caliber players that can play more, and that's nice. But if you asked me like 10 days ago how many minutes that Kobe and Bogey combined were going to average early in the year, I would have guessed like 40. Probably like a 27 and 13 kind of split, something like that, 28 and 12, but 40-ish minutes, maybe even more than that, depending on the night. So I think that's probably like 15 or 20 of those going to go to Veep pretty clearly between the backup point guard job and some wing stuff as well. A couple of cents per game for Garrison in a smaller role, but still like a ninth man role kind of thing as a backup wing. And probably a little bit more, again, of Reese Shea and maybe a little bit more of Hunter. Hunter had 5 fouls in the game on Wednesday, but only played 26 minutes. That will go up almost certainly now without Bogey. They do have depth again, and they have guys who can play more minutes, but I think you're already going to plan to kind of max out Trey and Jalen, and the centers are the centers. So everything else kind of has to be ratcheted up a little bit in the short term. One more thing people were asking me about is the Cody Zeller situation, basically, and whether the Hawks could sign someone using that roster spot. So I won't go through the entire thing again, but I know a lot of people were not necessarily dialed in during training camp, and they kind of come back to the season. So first of all, welcome back. Join us and listen to the podcast moving forward, subscribe, etc. But essentially, at Media Day, I asked Landry Fields about Cody Zeller, and essentially Landry told me into a microphone on the record that they were talking about buyout stuff with Cody Zeller. Now, it was not a specific answer beyond that, but when you bring that up, and then the player, this is crucial information, Cody Zeller has not appeared with the team at any point. Not at Media Day, not at training camp, not at games. He is not with the team. That's the official listing for Cody Zeller. So all that's, I know it's a little bit weird, but the Hawks are okay with that. Like, he's not just like not showing up. He's not holding out. The Hawks are okay with him being away from the team because they're not planning on him being in their plans long-term. But now you get 2 injuries. People, I would say, rightly and logically ask, we have this guy on the roster who's not going to even be with the team. Why won't they just cut him and move on and sign a guard of some kind? Whether it's a bigger name like Markelle Fultz has been a question people like ask me, or somebody that you don't know that's like a plug-and-play backup point guard, third point guard, whatever. Reasonable question, to be sure. And they could do that. Like they could right now on Thursday night, as I'm recording this podcast, they could waive Cody Zeller tonight and tomorrow sign a guard. They could do that. They are allowed to do that under league rules. However, if they do that, they'll be going over the luxury tax line, which is part of the reason why they're not doing that right now. Without going crazy into the money side here, even a minimum salary. So if they just waive Zeller, he has a guaranteed contract. You have to pay him his money. If you waive Zeller and then sign a guy for the minimum, you go over the tax line if you're the Hawks. Now, they can get under later if they want to, but they would at least nudge above the line if they did that for the rest of the season. Now, there's a way that they could kind of straddle that line if Zeller were to give money back in a buyout. And what a buyout is basically is that they're trying, if the Hawks are probably trying to get Cody Zeller to give them some money back to cut him and have him be free to sign somebody somewhere else. The trouble is Cody Zeller is fringy enough where I think he probably knows there is not a guaranteed job for him somewhere else. So he wants his money, and he should want his money, honestly, in the real world. For the Hawks, if he doesn't give any money back, they're going to owe him all his money. And only what Cody Zeller would have give back would not count against the cap. So long story short, that is why they've not already cut Cody Zeller. And there's a little bit of a sprinkling here of value potentially in that they could use Cody Zeller's money for a trade in a couple of months. Probably not now, but if they want to do that, or if they wanted to trade for a guard right now, you call a team up that has a guy that's not playing, you offer Cody Zeller and a second-round pick, and maybe that's enough to get it done. So there are ways to use that roster slot, that salary slot in a trade or whatever, but that is why they had not cut him already. Now, again, they could do it tomorrow. I would not fall on the floor and be surprised, but I know it's a little bit weird. I know people are not going to love that explanation. And yes, they have Keaton Wallace too, but Keaton Wallace is a guy I like, but is much more of a combo, not someone that want to run the offense. So I think they're still going to be going with Veet as a backup point guard. If something happens to Trey, knock on wood, obviously, if something happens to Trey while Kobe and Bogey are both down, that's a scenario where they're going to have to do something, whether it be a trade, whether it be cutting Zeller. Like at that point, you can't function. So as long as they have Trey, they're okay. Trey can play 35 minutes a night. It is what it is. You piece together the rest of it. If Trey were to go down, even for a game or two, while Kobe and Bogey are both out, then it gets to be pretty dire, but that would be something we don't have to hopefully cross that Rubicon when it actually arrives. Okay, that is the long story short explanation about this. It is not great. I'll admit that, but it also is not dire. Like there have been times even last year where the Hawks had cluster injuries at the forward spot where it was like really, really, really tough for them. This is not great. Bogey is a really, really good player, and Bufkin is a guy they like, of course, in the future, but they can manage this. Anything more than this, we'll see, but that is the short version of what we're talking about right now. All right. In a second, I will have some audio for you from Quin Snyder. Actually, it's pretty interesting audio. I do say some myself about Jalen Johnson, plus a preview of Hawks Hornets. But first, more from our partners on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 10 million members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or pick less on 2-6 players and their stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can win up to 100 times the money on your PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And PrizePicks is the best way to get on the action in really a lot of states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. At PrizePicks, they put their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. And when your picks hit, you actually get the money as fast as 15 minutes later. PrizePicks has also invented the flex play, which means you can actually still cash out if your picks in the lineup are not perfect. Double the money, even if one of your picks does not hit. You can spend your football weekends, basketball weekends, etc. at PrizePicks, and you know that basketball season is going to be coming fast and furious from this point forward. And it's a great time to go ahead and sign up with the folks at PrizePicks right now. Download the PrizePicks app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA when you get there. From there, get $50 instantly when you play $5. That code is LOCKEDONNBA at PrizePicks. You get $50 instantly when you play $5. One more time, you don't actually have to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed when you play $5. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, and before I dive into Hawks Hornets on Friday, I will quickly say I ran out of time for this yesterday on the show. I kind of knew I might have that happen because there's so much to cover in the opener. Locked On does not want me to go super long on these episodes. Like they want to keep it under like 35 minutes. I already went over that a little bit anyway. This is why I did not include this audio. But I thought it was really, really interesting. I actually shared it a little bit on Twitter as well. But if you're not on there, you wouldn't have seen this. So for some background, of course, I had the breakdown of Jalen Johnson's contract extension on Monday. Jalen signed on Monday. He spoke to the media on Tuesday. You'll hear this in the actual audio I'm going to play for you, but Caleb Johnson at 92.9, good guy over there, like Caleb a lot. He said in this audio that they're about to hear, basically, but Jalen spoke very glowingly of Quin Snyder at practice on Tuesday when he was being asked about his contract, et cetera, et cetera. And he said pretty plainly that Quin is the coach that has most believed in him in his entire career to this point, which is not a small thing for guys who've been playing basketball for a long time. So that was part of this. Now, and you'll hear Caleb ask Quin about that. And honestly, I'll just preface this. This is a very rare time for Quin Snyder where he was pretty revealing and actually kind of visibly emotional on the podium. So it's about 2 minutes long. It's a long clip for what I would normally play on the podcast, but it's kind of this is a bonus episode, et cetera, et cetera. So here is that full exchange between Caleb and then Quin's answer on Jalen Johnson.
Coach, we spoke to you before we spoke to Jalen yesterday. In talking to him about this new contract and everything, he said that he's never had a coach believe in him as much as you have. What does it mean to have that kind of impact on a player like that?
Frankly, it's everything. It's makes me emotional when I hear it because it's something that is important to me. And when you have guys that trust you, you believe in them, but they believe you too. And that's not always telling them the easy things. You're telling them things that are sometimes hard to hear. And he's been so coachable. Our first preseason game, I think it was like 4 minutes into the game and I called timeout and I jumped him about taking a bad shot, and knowing everything that's going on. But that's our relationship. And, more often than not, I'm challenging him to do something or encouraging him or complimenting him. And there's no question I do believe in him. And I believe in, as much as anything, the fact that I know he's going to continue to work. I think the contract is great. It's representative, not only what he's done, but what he's capable of doing. And he's someone that, I don't think is going to be satisfied. And he knows not every game is going to be a good game. He's going to have his struggles, and that's when you need to, I think as a coach, as much as anything, that's when you need to be there for him. And to tell him it's going to be all right, but also to tell him what he needs to do better. And the fact that he's not only willing, but willing to embrace that says a lot about him. as a player and a person. And, you know, frankly, I'm flattered, honored that he would say that. It's a privilege to coach him.
So yeah, obviously not much to add there. It was pretty interesting. You know, Quin is pretty guarded, pretty buttoned up. So clearly they have a connection. You know, there's this story that's been always circulated since Quin was hired about when he took over for the Hawks, and it really did happen this quickly. Where like Jaylen was kind of on the fringe of the rotation under Nate, and pretty much as soon as Quin got there, Quin was like, "Why isn't this guy playing?" And essentially played him every game, I think, or always close to it the rest of the season. And then the next year, the jump was last year, and then the rest is history. So if you're Jaylen, obviously you're probably extremely grateful for Quin to just back him and play him and kind of lead him down this path to being where he is now and making 9 figures, etc. So mutual respect and admiration there, and a cool little piece of audio that I want to play for you. Okay, before I sign off here, the Hornets game on Friday. So it's a divisional game. Of course, the Hawks and the Hornets will play 4 times this year. Last year, the Hawks went 1-3 against Charlotte, disappointingly, I would say. Charlotte has their own injuries, though, which is notable to me. Both Brandon Miller and Mark Williams are out for the Hornets. That is 2 starters for them, 2 of their more intriguing players. Miller's probably their second most intriguing player behind LaMelo Ball in some fashion. Williams is up there on the list, top 5 probably too. So they are probably even more banged up, I would say, given compared to their normal roster than the Hawks are. And the Hornets, though, did play very well in their opener. They were underdogs on the road in Houston, and they were down by 18 points and came back to win, actually, in upset fashion on Wednesday. LaMelo had a big game, 34 and 11 in that game. He and Miles Bridges will be their 2 guys that you would see the ball in their hands most of the time, along with Trey Mann, who had a big game on Wednesday as well. He'll probably be the primary when LaMelo sits, for example. I think the Hornets are okay. They're not a disastrous team. They're not in the Wizards tier of things, but they're not great either, I don't think, at this point in time. And for some background, the Hawks have actually right now, looking at this at FanDuel as we speak, make sure it hasn't changed. Yes, the Hawks are 5-point underdogs. Sorry, 5-point favorites at FanDuel. 5-point favorites at FanDuel in the game on Friday. That's pretty similar to Wednesday, but also a little bit smaller. The Hawks close as like 6.5-point favorites against Brooklyn on Wednesday. Now, part of this is interesting. Like Brooklyn's full season projection is much worse than Charlotte's. But as I said, even on the show on Tuesday and Wednesday, the current version of Brooklyn is not as bad as the full season version probably is, because they haven't traded anybody yet. And also, Brooklyn was healthier on Wednesday than Charlotte is now. Of course, the Hawks now lose Bogey as well. So it's probably worth some movement in some direction. Needless to say, the Hawks are favored in the game on Friday. They should be. It would not be impossible to envision a loss in this game. Like Charlotte is a competitive team. They just beat Houston on the road, and Houston is probably somewhat similar to the Hawks. In fact, if you looked at the projections, Houston is actually ahead of the Hawks in win totals. So Charlotte proved they can win that kind of game on Wednesday. We'll see. But a good spot for the Hawks, as I said before, these first 5 games the Hawks have, they'll be favored in 4 of them. The only time they're going to be on the road, underdog is on Sunday. In OKC, they'll be underdog almost certainly. But, 4-1's on the table. We'll see how this goes. But you got to win every game. And they're not a huge favorite. 5 points is not a massive number. And first game without Bogey. Got to navigate without Kobe as well. So interesting game on the horizon. I'll be in the building for that one on Friday evening. And we'll have a new show after the game, as we always do, on the podcast. Please go ahead and subscribe to Locked On Hawks anywhere you find your podcasts. I know a lot of you have done that already, and I'm very, very appreciative of that. But if you're a new listener or maybe a once-in-a-while listener, I thank you for that, but please go ahead and subscribe on audio platforms, especially Apple, Spotify, Overcast, etc. And if you also subscribe on YouTube, go ahead and do both to support the show. Like and have the notification bell alerted to where if there's a new podcast, you will know when it is dropping. Like the episode, each one as you're watching it, leave your favorite comments. Talk amongst yourselves in the comments. That also helps things. You can also follow the show on Twitter/X. It's at Locked On Hawks. You can follow me there at BT Rowland. I'm also, all my non-podcast work is at patreon.com/BT Rowland. I wrote a little bit today about the injury stuff, etc. Just some extra stuff there, extra audio, extra words, etc. All that is at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right. Little extra bonus episode on a Thursday night. Hopefully that will be informative on some level, even if it was not the greatest circumstances for the Hawks, having the 2 injuries to deal with now. But we'll see you in about 24 hours. Please stay tuned, subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you all next time.